Again, welcome all and being here with us to our Labor Forward interview series, a program of the School for Workers here at UW-Madison. Today, I do have the privilege of being in community with Christine Neumann-Ortiz, the Executive Director of Voces de la Frontera, based out of Milwaukee, but with chapters all across the state, and a leading national figure in the immigrant and workers' rights movement. Christine, we invited you here today because of not just who you are, but about with the campaigns that you are leading with Voces de la Frontera, and so that we can learn a little bit more about Voces and their organizing and its vision to the future as well.
Well, thank you for the invitation. Have a lot of respect for School for Workers and Labor Radio. So appreciate the opportunity.
So Christine, so Voces de la Frontera, as we know, is a membership-based community organization that's led by low-wage workers, immigrants, and youth, whose mission is to protect and expand civil rights and workers' rights through leadership development, community organizing, and empowerment. Could you talk about some of the campaigns that you currently have that uplift your mission?
Absolutely. I think one that we are elevating to a more public platform this May Day, on May 1st, as part of our statewide march and rally, is the very historic accomplishment of the immigrant rights movement, which is deferred action for undocumented workers who have filed a labor complaint with a government agency. And so this was won in 2021 and is unfolding. And here in Wisconsin, we are also on the front lines of that with a campaign that is not yet public, but really walking this path around using this new one right, which is a real historic game changer for both the immigrant rights movement and the labor movement, because what it does is it gives the ability for undocumented workers to file for deferred action, protected temporary status, similar to DACA, when they file a labor complaint. Could be on wages, discrimination, all of the labor rights agencies that we have, collective organizing, to then be able to have a support letter from the Department of Labor that can then be taken to USCIS and apply for a broad group of workers who would be impacted by the investigation and whose immigration status might hold them back. So it answers the question of what we know has been a problem for a long, long time, which is because of people's immigration status, their labor rights are undermined, and that drags down everybody's ability to improve wages and working conditions and just have dignity for working people, because of people's status. And so this is a very strong response to that, and we're very excited to be a part of that and think it's important for others to know about it.
Well, thank you, Christine, for sharing this new protection for workers that come forward when their rights have been violated on the job. Do you see this happening often, or do you hear from folks that are working, especially in those places where we know there are large numbers of workers who are more easily exploitable by unscrupulous employers?
Absolutely. And I think and discrimination is just kind of baked in the cake when we think of, even 20 years ago. I remember, you have temp agencies working at large corporations where people are not temporary workers, they're full-time permanent workers for years. Yet, for example, a company can have E-Verify, a system that's more rigorous in terms of comparing someone's information that they present at the time of hire with immigration and other databases. So basically it allows an employer to kind of wash their hands of any legal liability. But what happens is, in many ways, often they're channeled through temp agencies or forced to use somebody else's real documents, which then can be potentially be a felony charge against immigrant workers. So we have a very unequal system of justice, and a hypocritical one, because immigrant workers are still working, but they're just working with less rights. And what we've seen lately, I think, and I'm glad we see it in the mainstream news, is that with the recent waves of refugees that are coming a lot from Central America and in our part of the world, that you're seeing, the same kind of stuff that we're seeing in other cases where there are people who, because of the desperation and a labor shortage, they're being put to work, but they're not being trained properly. And, and that leads to unsafe working conditions. And, like we saw in Wisconsin recently in the, around Madison area, the death of a young Honduran child who came with his father as a refugee here and was working on a dairy farm. And because of the lack of funding for OSHA oversight and the lack of knowledge and resources, he ended up dying when he was run over by a machine. So it's just, the tragedy of it all. And it's actually growing, and it's both a human rights and a labor rights issue. And it speaks to both the need to strong labor protections and investment in in those agencies, as well as the need for constant and urgent need for immigration reform.
So you frame this new protection or this new possibility of protection in this deferred action as a victory for the immigrant and workers' rights social movement. Would you talk a little bit more about the immigrant and worker rights social movement that you, Voces, and other social movement organizations are a part of across the country?
I mean, with this recent, development, I think what's interesting about it is when we compare it to the other DACA that all of us pretty much, most people know by now, which is the one that's been afforded, was a victory of the immigrant rights movement in 2012, which is deferred action for immigrant youth, known as Dreamers. So it's similar in that, you are able to get it's not a path to citizenship as immigration reform would afford, but it is a temporary protected status from deportation that allows for a temporary work visa for 2 years, social security number, access to a driver's license. And, but unlike DACA, which was for Dreamers, the intention of that was, more on education. And so what you had to prove there was, that you were working towards your GED or graduate of high school and so forth. And it's been an excellent program, superb program that, as we speak, is under threat and has been cut for purely xenophobic, anti-immigrant racist reasons. There's no logic in it. But unlike this one, what is interesting, I find, is that it, to renew it, it does require that you have an active, like labor rights campaign or complaint that's going on. And as we know, in any of these places, especially where you have high concentrations of immigrants, immigrant workers, there's lots of issues that are going on there. And so it necessitates a sustained organizing effort, which I think is really good. It rewards ongoing organizing, which is a necessity. And frankly, I think one of the things that's, sad in a way with what happened with DACA is that it was very generational for the people that were involved in the original DACA fight. They were very clear that it was a product of their efforts, civil disobedience, get out the vote, accountability, just boldness of coming out as undocumented and unafraid, all of that, produced, DACA. But then there was a generation that came, after that, that wasn't really aware of that history. It was just something like, oh, you've reached that age, you need to apply for the paperwork. So that history of struggle was lost, and which means that it became a vulnerability for it to be taken away, because it was never meant to be, as it is, not a permanent protection. a permanent protection has to be won by immigration reform. So it has been devastating, to see, how, the doors have been locked for a new generation of those that had been qualified. It continues to be under threat. And so, however, having said that, it's like revived that consciousness and that struggle. But I think in some ways, the silver lining in this one, I would like it to lead to a path to citizenship right off the bat. I think it should. That would be fair. But we know these struggles are constant, so it rewards a constant struggle, and that is what we need, not just to kind of get our paper, get to a better place in terms of not having that threat over one's head, but also to improve wages and working conditions, which are, in our history of Voces, we've seen, people need both things. They're desperate for information about their rights in the workplace, and they are desperate for immigration reform, and they're desperate for driver's licenses. So, over the years, we've worked very much with an emphasis on informing people about their rights, but also collective action, and how can we build pressure in different ways to reinforce limited rights to protect immigrant workers. And a lot of that has had to do with collectivity and solidarity, in terms of, having, like, Fight for 15 has been very public, like community delegations to bring workers back after a strike. And so Voces had always been doing that quietly, because it's kind of a threat to then not make it public. For example, after a big statewide general strikes known as A Day Without Latinx and Immigrants, that have been important to beating back a lot of anti-immigrant policies here in Wisconsin.
So you spoke about driver's license, you spoke about workers' rights, you spoke about some sort of immigration reform, and in your opinion, a comprehensive immigration reform with a wide path to citizenship. And we know that Voces has organized some of the largest May Day marches in the country in recent history here in Wisconsin. Can you speak more as to how a march like the May Day March encompasses all those issues or all those demands that you're making through your organization?
May Day is now really a national day of action. Voces is part of the Fair Immigration Reform Movement, which represents, the largest, network of immigrant rights organizations in the country, and all of which are, rooted in a membership-based structure that, provides direction for not just the local or state work, but the national work. And so that was started in 2000. So it's been 23 years now. And it's really developed and is strong and has been very important in not just the fight around immigrant rights, but like the pro-democracy fight in general. As part of that struggle has also been, organizing the vote, the Latino and immigrant vote, which is a growing demographic, as we know, and building political strength. For us here in Wisconsin, it really came in the wake of what really, I think, birthed the modern immigrant rights movement, which was a wave of strikes in 2006 in March that happened in the wake of Sensenbrenner, Representative Sensenbrenner from Wisconsin. He introduced a bill, HR 4437, that would have criminalized, like an aggravated felony charge, any immigrant, including child. There were no bars. To turn them into aggravated felony. They're simple. The fact that it's a civil infraction right now to be undocumented, it would have turned it into an aggravated felony, which is a very, very serious charge. You're talking about cartel type being equated to that type of activity. And anyone who knew someone's status and didn't turn them in would also face criminal charges. So this bill had a whole bunch of horrible things, but those were two things that, as an emerging national movement, we really were able to lift up. And it was a call, and it was a call to a strike. People talk about it as a wave of marches, but it was a strike. And what it did is it brought out of the shadows working people, and it really, and their families. So, fathers and mothers and, pushing the stroller. You had, abuelitos and abuelitas, the grandmas and grandpas, in their wheelchair or canes, and throughout, this country that came out and, mass marches. And it really birthed the modern movement. Now, Voces, May 1, decided to have a strike known as that, as a May 1 as a kind of marker. And ever since then, it's become a tradition, and it has become that way for men nationally as well. So it provides an opportunity. This year, and as a marker, we have been very strategic around where it happens and what the demands are. And it's been transformative for many of the children who, like people in the movement now who are activists or even working for Voces, like remember marching as children in these, it's been transformative for the families. And like a segue into a commitment to activism. And so for this year, the principal demands are, we've decided to, to lift up something that our youth arm organizes around, which is the School Lunch Justice Campaign, very much driven by the students themselves in terms of budget priorities and healthy and cultural respective lunches in many of the school districts where you have high poverty levels. So the food is very, very important, and it's really gone down over time. And so it's very much empowering because it's being directed by the students themselves. And we've made tremendous advances in moving forward with that in Milwaukee, and it's really a call to action statewide for school boards and youth. And then the second thing is at the state level, really at the heart of this march is really our announcement around a new commitment to fight to restore driver's licenses in Wisconsin, which we lost in 2007. This is a state-by-state battle. In 2007, that was repealed by the federal Real ID, and now it becomes one option is a state-by-state battle, which has been playing out most recently in Minnesota, becoming the 19th state. If you consider District of Columbia, if we just broadly say, because Puerto Rico and District of Columbia, that would include Puerto Rico and District of Columbia. And so that's really a huge one. Tuition equity, which we had and was stripped in 2011 when Act 10 was also in that same budget process. That was also lost. That had been a 10-year fight here in Wisconsin. And then at the national level, what's uniting us is really a call to end program, to put pressure on Biden administratively to end 287G, a program that deputizes local law enforcement to become immigration enforcement agents. And this is a voluntary program, but it's being incentivized through federal contracts. So it's very dangerous, and it's spreading. It grew under Trump, and it needs to be ended. It was a campaign promise under the Biden administration. It's continuing to grow. And so the second one is calling on the Biden administration to expand temporary protected status for different groups, including the most recent group from Nicaragua. And then obviously a broader call for immigration reform from Congress. Chirla, based out of California, has really been taking a lead on the registry, which is a very simple fix to our immigration system, which would simply change the date. It's already kind of in the books, but it would just change the date of who can qualify. And so it's a very simple fix to our broken immigration system that would, be able to create a legal pathway for millions of workers and their families in this country.
Those are some big demands, Christine, and I know that Voces has been working on these demands for decades now, and have been part of social justice movement that's seeking societal and just change. Would you speak about the trajectory that you see with Voces into the future with regards to your organizing in general?
Yeah, we just had our annual assembly in January and voted for a refinement of our plans for ahead. I think part of it is, it was extremely bittersweet that in 2021 we came one vote short in the Senate of winning immigration reform, and we had to push every step of the way, to make immigration a priority. It often wasn't talked about, but it was actually moving forward, and it was one. But I would say that, I think we built power. We are so much closer. There is broad support. It actually cuts across party lines, whether people consider themselves independent or Democrat or Republican. There is broad support for immigration reform, including, even like safe avenues for refugees and driver's licenses in Wisconsin. So I think one is to reaffirm with our supporters and the immigrant workers themselves and their families that we have been building power as a movement, and that we have to keep pushing forward. And the way we've been pushing forward, I think the only refinement that we're making is building out the Essential Worker Rights Network more. That was kind of rebirthed our reorientation around more deeper commitment to worker rights and worker organizing. Came out of a necessity in the pandemic when we intervened to literally help save lives of workers, particularly in the food industry, that had no protections and were asking for help. And so that kind of birthed the Essential Worker Rights Network. And so I would, part of that is we've always leaned into workers' power, their economic power when they unite to put pressure, to be valued, and to put pressure on the powers that be, either their employers and through them, the elected officials. And so we believe, rural orientation is very important. And then since immigrants are across all industries, and I think with deferred action, this is a very important game changer to the future, nationally. It's significant, but, I know there's more details maybe for a future show, how it works and how it's implemented, but yeah, I think that's, that is one of our it's emphasis. It's a question of emphasis. And then, and strategy, just going deeper into that. And then the other thing, of course, is our excellent youth work, and that really represents a multiracial, multi-ethnic, because it's rooted in the schools and it really reflects the diversity of our schools. And it's so important to bring in energy and ideas and that next generation into the work. It's the fact that we're multi-generational, that we're family-based, so you have many generations there. It's powerful. It's a tremendous strength. And then we've always had the C4 arm of Voces, Frontera Action, which also came out of the community need to, when we started doing Get Out the Vote, to be able to have capacity to make endorsements. And so that's been a very important part of the work that we do through a network called Voceros por el Voto, which is a network built from our members and their family and friends and people they know, that voter. And it's largely people who are coming in as new voters into the process. And we know since 2018, since we've scaled this up, it's now up to 30,000 people. It has unquestionably had an impact in very important elections. But our community doesn't want to just vote and hear promises. They want, they want the promises to be fulfilled. And so we always want to be, thoughtful and articulating that, it's not just, voting is not enough. It is critical, it is essential, but it is not enough. And that it has to be part of a broader year-round effort of organizing and building power in different ways. So it's both through community pressure, through the campaigns that we're building out, which build out alliances like driver's license for immigrants, which has support from, for example, employer associations and things like that. As well as the, so through that coalition work on these community-based campaigns, through a worker rights effort, through a youth effort, and through electoral power. And then we also provide important services to help people where they can adjust their status. The New American program helps people become new citizens. It's growing. And so it's another way to build a pro-immigrant voting bloc that can then turn Wisconsin back to a progressive state as it used to be.
Christine, we have only a couple minutes left. Any call to action for our sisters and brothers in the labor movement and in other movements so that involve social justice?
Well, since we're not too far off from May 1, you have not missed it. And solidarity is power. And it's very inspirational. People are so grateful to see, to see people marching with them in solidarity. and every person matters. So we would invite you to visit our website, vdlf.org. You can Spanish or English, and you can click on the part that says know more about May Day. And we have posted, we have Spanish and English digital flyers that can be shared and downloaded, and lots of information. We have some buses coming from different parts of the state, if that's important or important to people you share it with. And we welcome you to stand with us. It's a very, very important day to send the powers that be a strong message that, that workers' rights are, immigrant rights and human rights. And so, we know that anti-immigrant politics is at the center of, like the far right agenda, and that we often have to shore up Democrats on this issue to not default to caving into that. So it really depends on us, and we all have a stake in this fight, and we need everyone in this fight. So please join us on May 1st. If you're national, you're welcome to, maybe look into it, or let me know. We have the FIRM network, the Fair Immigration Reform Network. But certainly if you're in Wisconsin, please join us in Milwaukee, or help spread the word, or donate to help cover some of the costs of the buses and Spanish language radio ads and flyers that we've been producing.
Christine Neumann-Ortiz, Executive Director, Voces de la Frontera, and National Leader in the Immigrant and Worker Rights Movement. So to learn more about Voces de la Frontera and about May Day, visit bdlf.org. Muchísimas gracias, Christine. And as always, where your leadership is always welcomed in community.
Thank you, Armando. Thank you for your leadership as well. Y sí se puede.
Sí se puede.